There's the Gotham 1939 documentary series, which at this point I starting to see that it's going downhill in terms of quality, as not much is contributing to the time period, and it's not really that exciting or unique, even though going into it, it seems very promising. Then somebody else brought up Gotham 1989 documentary. And the same guys, the Batfeed, the guys that did 1919 documentaries, is doing 1889. 1889, 100 years before the Batman movie by Tim Burton. You would think that this fan-made documentary is just made by someone else other than the Batfeed that decides to rip off or take some notes from 1990 documentary to 39. But instead, the same guys who made those documentary series is doing this one. But there doesn't seem to be as much videos. I'm looking at the description, and one of them says that it's inspired by Gotham by Gaslight. I have not watched that movie or read the comic, but the costume definitely does seem similar, that's for sure. So this is pretty much more or less a Gotham by Gaslight documentary. Before Soviet threats in the world wars, there was the Glided Age of America, the birth of the Bat, the Glider Age area, which is the end of the Victorian era. I don't know what the heck that stuff is. All I can say is that's the stuff in the past that will hopefully never happen again. With that said, let's check out this different documentary and see if it'll be just as unique as the other documentary series.
The Gilded Age in America was one of mystery, industry, and glamour. But underneath all of that, there was dirt, grime, and corruption. Gotham City was no exception.
I swear, some of this looks HD.
As a settlement,
and has HD effects.
Made a name for itself in the fur trade.
1685.
It quickly grew until British occupation in the early 1700s, and then the Revolutionary War in 1776. There were many men and women of historical notoriety in the war, notably among them Mad Anthony Wayne. He had earned his nickname for his angry temperament, infamous for punishing the men serving under him severely, and also for his fierce assaults against the British military forces. Anthony Wayne was known for many acts, but not all of them were honorable. He is considered to be one of the people responsible for the start of a long history of aggression, violence, and discrimination towards the Native American populace. He amassed enough wealth and societal standing to pass down through his family.
So a Wayne started all of this?
Long after his military career, some of his descendants set out and a few settled in Gotham City. The Wayne family in Gotham quickly used their popularity and accumulated wealth to found Wayne Industrial Co. on the cusp of the 1820s. Along with the Cobblepot and Sionis families, the Waynes helped launch Gotham in the American Industrial Revolution. This effectively put the families at the head of the economy in Gotham. Gotham began to thrive. As the 1830s arrived, so did the latest member of the Wayne family, Thomas. Thomas eventually met his wife, Martha Arkham, as he neared young adulthood, and the two became married.
Martha Arkham.
They were determined to put the sordid past of the Wayne family behind them and lead Wayne Industrial Co. in a different direction. One for the betterment and inclusion of the people.
So, some jerk of a Wayne in the 1700s or the 1600s has been starting some crimes and stuff, and apparently it seems to be a bad case for a while. But then the Waynes, years later, decide to start a corporation to fix everything and such. Well, not fix everything, but try to move on to a better chapter.
One step that Thomas took was hiring a young man, Lucius Fox, as his head chief foreman.
Lucius Fox?
It was a highly controversial move, as Lucius was a black man. and tensions were high between northern and southern states. But Lucius overcame that obstacle, performing above and beyond for Wayne Industrial Co.
Yikes! Playing the race card. Back in the day. But sadly, that would just be the case. But seriously, good on Lucius for this. Good on Lucius for overcoming the odds and being recruited.
Thomas and Lucius became fast friends. The future was looking bright. Then came the American Civil War in 1861.
Ooh, an American Civil War.
In April of 1861, Thomas and Martha conceived a child, unbeknownst to both of them. As the Civil War conflict began, Thomas left Gotham to fight for the northern states alongside his best friend, Jacob Packer. Utilizing their training as surgeons, they became field medics for the Union.
Ah, the nursing stuff.
Soon after, Martha...
That's a callback to Batman Begins. Batman Begins, Thomas Wayne is a nurse or works in a hospital or something.
Began to notice the subtle changes. She was pregnant. In January of 1862, she gave birth to their son, Bruce Thomas Wayne. Thomas was, against all odds, allowed a brief amount of leave once he received word of his son's birth. It was a joyous occasion for both Thomas and Martha in the midst of such a bloody conflict, but left Thomas's friend Jacob a bit spiteful towards him. Though Thomas had to return to the war, the Waynes brought into their employ one Alfred Pennyworth, a young actor and former veteran from England. Thomas had met him at a boxing match some years prior where the two had gone head-to-head, concluding with a draw. Thomas wanted a butler to aid Martha in the raising of the young Wayne son. With the end of the American...
This is how they met. They wrestled, and since Alfred lost, he has to be the butler. Thomas Wayne is such a badass.
Civil War in 1865, Thomas returned home, disillusioned by the horrors he had seen in the battlefield. As the years progressed, he poured himself into his work as a surgeon. He pioneered new techniques, having seen many amputations and botched medical procedures on the battlefield. Thomas left the handling of the family company to more interested parties, while still remaining the owner. Bruce grew into a healthy young boy, cherishing his parents like none other. His parents loved him with all their hearts, and he loved them with all of his. When the boy reached the age of 10 years, one tragic event changed all of that.
This particular Batman apparently hasn't been a kid until he was 10 years old. Justice League Unlimited reference.
After attending a performance at the Gotham Opera, Thomas, Martha, and Bruce were riding home in their stagecoach. During their journey back to the Wayne estate, their coach was held up on one of the back roads. A man cloaked in shadow coerced them out of the carriage, demanding their valuables. Thomas, being a former military man, tried to stop the bandit, but was shot, soon followed by Martha. Bruce could only watch on in horror as his life crumbled before him. The criminal next turned his guns on the boy, but was stopped when a colony of bats was startled out of the surrounding trees. The shadowy man fled in terror, leaving the young boy with his dead parents.
Oh, so Bruce Wayne was about to get killed as well, but the swarm of bats saved him. Okay.
It was once the police became involved that a young Bruce met James Gordon, a rookie police
Lieutenant
officer
James
new
Gordon.
to Gotham. The young policeman and former Civil War veteran comforted Bruce and assured him in the midst of his shock.
How much artwork did they do to replicate the time period?
This tragedy scarred the boy for life. He was left in the care of Alfred and a nun and family friend of the Waynes named Sister Leslie Tompkins.
I don't know who that is.
Bruce spent much of his childhood at the orphanage that Sister Leslie ran, St. Caldwell's. It became like a second home to him. He had few friends among the other orphans, except for a young girl named Selina Kyle.
The Catwoman.
As Bruce grew into young adulthood, he left the sanctuary of St. Caldwell's. He had grown accustomed to hiding his anger, masking his pain, and appearing composed, but underneath, he was enraged at his parents' murder. He saw the crime and corruption everywhere, the child labor in factories, the corrupt police force, the prostitution, and the petty crime that had become a part of Gotham's culture. He began to lose hope. One night, after a particularly intense depressive episode, he stumbled to his parents' grave. There, he vowed he would wage war on the crime and corruption seated in Gotham City. But in order to do this, he knew he needed to be more than just a rich aristocrat, more than just a man. In 1879, at the age of 17, Bruce left Gotham to travel worldwide, studying various methods of criminology, investigation, and deduction. Over the next few years, Bruce encountered many names that were mentioned in those circles. He met a young Harry Houdini and trained alongside him in the art of escapology, before the magician's illustrious career. He met Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and trained under him in the art of deduction, using the author's character Sherlock Holmes as an inspiration. He had many more teachers, with his final being Sigmund Freud, with whom he trained in psychology. The two left on rather tense terms as their ideologies tended to put them at odds. By 1889, Bruce had studied under and trained with some of the most accomplished men in history, but there was still something missing in his preparations. During his travels, he encountered many different cultures, and one symbol stood out to him: the bat.
Because they saved him.
In Celtic folklore, they were a symbol of change, courage, and hope, while in most other places in Europe, they were symbols of evil, fear, and terror. Bruce saw this as a twofold reason for his war on crime. He would give Gotham citizens hope and courage while instilling fear and terror in the hearts of the criminal element. He would bring justice to a city in which there was none.
Okay.
And so, in 1889, the Bat was born. Bruce's return to Gotham in 1891 was a triumphant one. He spent a small amount of time visiting old friends: James Gordon, Sister Leslie, Lucius Fox, and most of all, Alfred. He also ran into his father's old friend, Uncle Jacob Packer. Soon after his return, a mysterious new figure appeared: the Batman. The filth and scum that had festered for so long in the streets of Gotham finally had a response to wash it away in the Bat. The Batman began his war on crime, filling the massive void caused by Gotham's underworld. Rumors began to circulate. Was he a vampire? Was he a spirit? Or was he just a man? But alongside the start of his crusade came another, one with much more sinister goals. Whitechapel, 1888 to 1891. This was a time of terror in England. It saw the murders of many women by the killer known as Jack the Ripper. He had left numerous notes and letters to the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, but none could guess his true identity. Then, as suddenly as the murders started, they stopped. No one knew who had committed them, and no one knew where he went. There were suspects, but evidence was never conclusive. What had happened to Jack the Ripper? It wasn't until 1892 when the world decided to take a day off. The Gotham City Police Department.
Day off! Take a day off. Brave fun again. He decided, I'm going to kill. This is no fun. This is disgusting. I think I'll just move on with my life.
Began to receive letters from Jack. He openly challenged the police as well as the rumored Batman, stating that he had already begun killing again.
Oh my gosh. Batman!
The reign of the Ripper marked a new age in Gotham, as it was one of fear and of hope. Jack the Ripper and the Batman. Eventually, Jack the Ripper was apprehended, having been revealed to be none other than Jacob Packer, Thomas Wayne's longtime friend. His psychosis ran deep, and the man was sentenced to life in Arkham Asylum for the criminally insane. The Civil War had left its mark on the man. It was not long after
Wars can
that
fuck up
Gotham
people.
City officials,
Unfortunately,
wanting to put the horrors of Jack behind them, started to push for the Gotham World Fair. It was a renewal project that sought to bring in tourists from all around the world, showcase numerous industrial strides, and lighten the darkness that had surrounded Gotham for so long. It was almost as if Gotham itself took this as a challenge. The Gotham World Fair saw numerous threats from its conception. Edward Nashton and his labyrinthine hotel, Alexander Leroy and his magnifying lens used to burn buildings and people alive from his blimp, and the Wonder City calamity. The
Is that some
Batman
kind of
fought
robot?
long and hard to match the threats presented by these criminals. The evil in Gotham was beginning to evolve, but none were so gruesome as the Joker. Nick.
That is one normal looking Joker. He doesn't look very over the top, but I know he's the Joker. The Merry Widower?
Nicknamed the Merry Widower by the police, this man would marry women of wealth and status, then poison them using strychnine. He killed 10 women before being apprehended by police, but not before he attempted to evade them by suicide.
Okay, stop closing in.
The murderer used the very poison he had on his former wives, but it didn't kill him. It instead scarred him, turning his skin pale, his hair a sickly dark green, and pulling his facial muscles into a ghastly grin. The birth of the Joker was as gruesome as the horrors he would inflict on Gotham in the years to come.
Oh, there we go.
With the passage of years came a bitterness in Bruce's view of the city he had fought so hard to protect. He had seen the rise of many allies and many new foes, and what he was left with was death and destruction. He eventually retired in 1912, having reached his 50s.
That's it?
When the Great War arrived in 1914, he had seen too much battle in Gotham to have the physical capacity to join this battle. Instead, he used his influence and wealth to aid those disparaged by the war. Bruce came to Gotham's aid in many other ways, including training his eventual replacement, Terrence McGinnis. But he died in 1953 at the age of 89. Gotham still stands to this day, and it will always remember the Batman. Over the centuries, he has become the inspiration for many urban legends and folklore. To some, he was a mythical being. To others, he was a helping hand. But one thing we do know about him: he brought justice to Gotham.
That's for sure. Okay. This is pretty good. There is a lot of lore, and I wonder if they took the time to make up some of the arts to contribute to fit the time period this takes place in. And the Jack the Ripper part, at first I thought it was going to be Commissioner James Gordon. Spoilers if you haven't seen or heard about Gotham and Gaslight, but I was expecting it to be James Gordon. Instead, it's his uncle. I think it's his uncle. Either way, there is plenty of lore. There is some good artwork I've seen here. Some footage. Not so much. Well, a little bit of the footage. The bats. They have a meaning here. They have symbolism. I really like this so far. This may just be as good as the first few episodes of Gotham 1939 series. And it's made by the same guys who... It's made by the same guys. Good for them. If you like what you see, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel. And I hope you have a good day or night and take care.